And we're off on this crazy trip again. The forecast is for a couple of days of almost no wind, motoring, using way too much diesel, followed by on Saturday and Sunday a real storm. After that, maybe I'll have some good sailing.
You got a great car, yeah, what's wrong with it today? I used to have one too, maybe I'll come and have a look. I really love your hairdo, yeah. I'm glad you like mine too. See what looking pretty cool will get you.
Oh, it is cold and foggy and gray up here in Canada at just off of Cape Sable at the southern end of Nova Scotia. Hard to believe there's a big storm coming through tonight, but there is. Right now, we got 4 sails up. I don't know if we can see them all. The Genoa, the staysail, the double reef Maine, and the mizzen. And it's just another beautiful day out here on the ocean. See you in a few days. There's an old saying that every sailor loves a squall, but no sailor likes a gale. And this first one on the trip was wet and dirty. It was rough because the swell was coming from 2 directions, causing uncomfortable and large seas, and the wind stayed above 30 knots for hours at a time. I was prepared to stop the boat, known as heaving to, but found that Malabar seemed happy to sail on under a staysail and double-reefed Maine. And given the choice of stopping for some marginal comfort or making 7 knots during the next couple of days, I opted for sailing on. In the rough conditions, I managed to injure my wrist. 6 weeks later, after returning, I would learn that it had been fractured. As gales do, this one eventually blew itself on past us. After the wind had laid down a bit, I was experimenting with unfurling the big Genoa headsail and found that it had jammed. In retrospect, the cause was embarrassingly simple, but I jumped to the conclusion that it was more complex and lowered the sail. This was a big mistake. The sail went over the rail and filled with seawater. With difficulty, I was able to get the sail back on deck and tied down. But the weight of the seawater caused the starboard lifeline to break and become useless. A little bit of stupidity goes a very long way out in the ocean. Now I had the task of raising the big headsail, alone and with one good hand, in big winds, with no lifeline on the starboard foredeck. I rehearsed it in my mind about 100 times, and when I could go through the entire procedure mentally without making any mistakes, I went up on the deck and tried it. To my complete amazement, I got the sail back up and furled. That was a good day. But I do think it was suitable punishment for my stupidity. Thursday, June 12, update from the North Atlantic. Right now, I'm out of the Gulf Stream, but when I get about 54 degrees west longitude, I ought to pick it up again. It makes a big difference when you're going at sailboat paces. Today we're going to get kind of an unpleasant cross swell from the northeast. Not going to be quite as comfortable, but it's the way it goes. Anyway, what an adventure. The time of my life.
Saw it written and I saw it say, Bingo Moon.
Friday the 13th. It's probably bad luck for somebody somewhere, but not for Malabar. It's been just a beautiful day here today. Winds, you know, between 15 and 20. Sunny. Just gorgeous. No complaints. We passed 1,000 miles today, and you know, that's a milestone. It's about halfway. Puts me about 1,000 miles from anywhere. About as far in the middle of the ocean as you can get in the North Atlantic. One question I get from the most well-meaning, really good friends is, when are you going to get there? I never answer that question for 3 reasons. First, I got no idea. I don't know. Second, if I have a target, which I do, you know, it's constantly shifting day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment. But the third reason, and the most important one, is that this isn't about crossing the finish line and busting some tape with your chest. Far from it. This is about the journey. And that's what it's all about. And so, I get there when I get there. You know, I was thinking that the first guy to sail around the world non-stop solo, Robin Knox Johnston, in his book, said a couple of things that really stuck with me. One was that he said that he was no yachtsman, and he's being overly modest, but what he meant by that was he was not one of these guys that goes to yacht clubs with his blazer on and talks about sail shape and these things. That he's more of an adventurer. And I damn sure am no yachtsman or even a sailor, so I think about that, and it gives me a lift. Sunday, June 15th. Storm's just moving in. It's a lot nicer day today. It's blowing about 16 knots. Yesterday, it worked us over, that gale did. And, you know, it was 35 knots steady, gusting up 42. And poor little Malabar, she held up really great, but we had some tests that we hadn't had before. That my pretty new hatch covers on the deck done really well in rain and Penobscot Bay and mist and spray, but they hadn't had any waves wash entirely over the deck We hadn't been submarining through waves like that before. And the water would get up under the hatch covers and pour in, buckets in. Just buckets of green ocean water coming in over my books and my beds and everything else. So I learned I got to put some gaskets in that thing. Got a shot making the pit stop in the Azores. Again, we shall see. Let you know. My original plan was to make my landfall in the Azores in the port of Angra do Heroísmo on the island of Terceira. I intended to pass by the famous town of Horta on the island of Faial for several reasons. The harbor at Horta is notoriously crowded. When I had called the marina before leaving Maine, they honestly told me there would be no way I could have a spot on the dock. I would have to anchor out and dig in the shore. And the anchoring in Horta is notoriously poor. The bottom of the harbor is foul with scrap and old chains and discarded anchors. So I had no plans to go there. But then the wind, or fate, sort of blew me toward Horta. After 16 days and some 2,000 nautical miles out of Maine, I picked up the towering volcano of Pico on the horizon. In front of Pico was the island of Faial, and I had plenty of daylight left. Pico on the right, there in the haze, and Faial here closer. Just spectacular. It was now convenient to make landfall in Horta, and I could not resist. Sailing Malabar through the narrow channel between Faial and Pico on a sunny day was a dream. These islands, temperate not tropical, rise to spectacular heights from the bottom of the ocean. In 1895, in the first solo circumnavigation in history, Joshua Slocum saw the same sight. He described it this way. Early on the morning of July 20, I saw Pico looming above the clouds on the starboard bow. Lower lands burst forth as the sun burned away the morning fog, and island after island came into view. As I approached nearer, cultivated fields appeared, and oh, how green the corn. Only those who have seen the Azores from the deck of a vessel realize the beauty of the mid-ocean picture. And I have to tell you, I had to agree with Slocum. We anchored in the harbor at Horta. It was indeed just as crowded as advertised. The boats on the pier were rafted up 3 and 4 deep, and the boats at anchor were packed in just as tight. A Frenchman chased me away when I anchored too close to him, and then 30 minutes later, I shooed away some Germans who were trying to anchor too close to me. But Malabar and I were finally at anchor, and how wonderful that felt. And Horta is indeed a gorgeous little Portuguese colonial town that is justly famous as the yachting crossroads of the Atlantic.